name is Jenna, but you guys can call me Jen. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. Hi, hello! Welcome to my February wrap-up. This past month in February, I ended up reading 13 books and had a fairly okay reading month, ratings-wise. I mean, there was only like 1 5-star, which is a little unfortunate, but I did have a reread that I really enjoyed. I got through a bunch of books off my TBR, my actual physical TBR. I got through 9 that were on my TBR, and then 2 of them were from the library as well. So let's just get into it. We got a big old stack. So first up, that reread that I ended up finishing right at the beginning of the month was The Blighted Stars by Megan E. O'Keefe. This I read because I'm going to be doing a series video on this series, the Devoured Worlds trilogy. I am currently partway through book 2 and loving it. So love this. This reread was stunning. I love being back in this world. This was an almost favorite of last year and it definitely stands up. Still gets 4.5 stars. Absolutely fucking love this. This follows Tarquin, who is a young son of this like really big family, the Mercator family, who does all the mining now as in the space travel. They do all the mining of this substance called relkite. And relkite is what they use in a lot of their technology and a lot of their systems to live. And without relkite, they are shit out of luck for a lot of different things, especially the technology that they use to reprint bodies and to keep those like neural pathways intact. And the technology in here is one of my favorite things. I love how it ties into like the giant mystery of everything going on in this book specifically, and how it continues into the second book so far. This is fantastic. So Tarquin at the beginning of this is on this mission with his father to go to this planet, this one planet that has not yet been mined called Sixth Cradle. But on the way there, their ship gets attacked, sabotaged, something happens, they get attacked, his father dies, which is totally fine because he can just be reprinted back at home, but dies on the ship, so he's no longer there. And Tarquin decides to take this new EX, an exemplar, who has just been printed that he believes to be EX Lockhart, who is his like father's brand new EX, who has just been printed out of this machine. He decides to take her and all these people and essentially like save them as best he can. And they crash land on Sixth Cradle to find it already dying, already underway of this absolutely terrible kind of sickness fungus called the Shroud. His family, the Mercator family, has been accused recently by this revolution group, the Conservators, specifically by this Nyra Sharp, for being the cause of all these deaths, of all these worlds dying because of the Shroud coming in after they've mined the planet. But the Mercator family says, we have nothing to do with that. The Shroud has nothing to do with our mining processes. And Tarquin wants to prove that correct. They crash land on this planet, shit's bad, and the EX that he had printed is not who he thinks it is. It is actually Nyra Sharp printed into this body of this EX Lockhart. And it's also got a romance. It's so good. It's so good. It's got horror elements. I loved this. One of the best sci-fis. I'm so excited to continue with the series. Then I ended up reading the only 5-star of the month and the first book for the My Friends Pick My TBR vlog. So there's a lot of them in here. I'm going to go quickly through these ones specifically that were part of the My Friends Pick My TBR vlog for the month of February, because you don't want to hear me talk about it here and also there. So I'll go quickly. That vlog is going to go live next week anyways, next Friday, so you guys can watch out for that. This one, phenomenal, broke my brain, too timely, 5 stars. Everybody needs to read this. The next one that I read specifically for that video was The League of Gentlewoman Witches by India Holton. This gets 3.5 stars. I'm beginning to suspect that India Holton's romances are all the exact same, and that it's a lot of fun, but like, I couldn't tell you the characters' names. I couldn't tell you any differences between this one and the 2 other India Holtons that I've read so far, other than the world building, because the world building in here is really cool. We love pirate ships that are houses. Pirate houses. The next one that I read for that video is Moonbound by Robin Sloan. This is a speculative, weird sci-fi fantasy set 11,000 years in the future with a narrator who is essentially a sentient something that lives in the blood of this young boy at the beginning of this, who's like supposed to be this prophesized something. I don't know. I gave this 2.5 stars. Did not work for me, unfortunately, which is really sad because speculative books do tend to kind of hit for me. Like if you have like Water Moon or the Delegat Dream Department Store, like those ones work really well for me. This one did not hit the mark. All the concepts are so cool in here. The execution, not quite. Then I read The Tainted Cup for that video by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is a fantasy mystery that is so convoluted and confusing that I still don't know what actually went down in this. All I know is that I kind of liked the vibes, and I will be continuing with the series because I also really liked the characters. So this gets 3.5 stars and probably needs a reread. Then I read Indians on Vacation for that video by Thomas King, and this one gets 2 stars. I understand the point of this. It's just really not for me. It read like watching paint dry and listening to 2 boomers talk about nothing for 4 hours. It was a lot. Then I read For She Is Wrath for that video, and this is a Pakistani retelling of The Count of Monte Cristo. Standalone YA fantasy. I really enjoyed this. The writing is incredible. I really liked the storyline, and I went in for female rage. I got that and then some. Highly recommend this. Then I read Cascade Failure, again for that video. This is a fun found family sci-fi that has some hard-hitting elements to it. A group of ragtag people kind of get into contact with something that they don't know what the general scope actually is, and they get in a little over their heads, saving the world and all that kind of stuff. And then the second last book for that video I read was The Truth According to Ember by Danica Nava. This is the first traditionally published romance written by an Indigenous author, which we love. However, this really fell flat for me, and I'm so sad about it. I did not like the couple in here. I loved Dan, the love interest. I cannot pronounce his name. I'm so sorry. We're gonna call him Dan. I loved him. He was fantastic. He deserves so much better than Ember, and Ember felt very childish throughout this entire thing. I did not like the lying in here. It was like every time she lied, I was like, girly pop, just like fix it right now. You're digging yourself. What are you doing? Like it drove me nuts. I didn't like their relationship very much. Also, there was like one proper sex scene in here, and it wasn't really well written either. It was very short for a romance book. It felt like the author was kind of like afraid to write a proper romance sex scene. Anyways, I did like the representation in here. I did also like the disability rep in here because Dan's younger sister has Down syndrome, and she is fucking amazing and so fabulous. It just really didn't work for me overall. 2.5 stars. And then finally for that video, we ended with House of Frank by Kay Sinclair, which is a 4.5 star. This is an incredible cozy fantasy that deals with grief. It is the storyline of a sister bringing her sister's ashes to this house called House of Frank to have them buried. It is her sister's final wish. It's Saika, our main character's battling with that, letting her sister go and meeting all the people there and then finding a life in this place. And it's also a little sapphic, which we love. There's great rep in that one too. There's trans rep and also ace rep and arrow rep. I believe the one character is ace and arrow. Fantastic. So there's also incredible representation for memory loss in here. It hit me so hard. It's great. Other than that, this month, I also read Death of the Author by Nyeri Okorafor. This I was expecting so much more from. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. Going in, I was expecting something very sci-fi, very weird because of the blurb on the book. I read a blurb somewhere that originally when I saved this to my want to read and then let me put it on hold from my library because I was very intrigued by it, I thought we were getting a sci-fi book that was like this author who's very down on her luck one day starts writing the sci-fi book and suddenly the world around her starts to change and is affected by the sci-fi book. That is what I thought we were getting. What we got instead is a literary fiction book about this disabled Black woman who is a part of a very, very vocal Nigerian family, very judgmental Nigerian family. And she one day, rock bottom, at her sister's wedding, loses her job, her book gets rejected, and she just decides one day that day at rock bottom to write something new. She starts writing this AI robot story, and we get snippets of this AI robot story throughout the book, and that is what the sci-fi elements of this are. This book skyrockets her to incredible stardom. It takes like 1.5 to 2 years for her obviously to write the book, finish the book, then give it to her editor and an agent and all this kind of stuff, and for it to get published. But in the meantime, that whole aspect of her stardom and the effects of that is the book. This is Yellowface without the, stealing someone else's book who is a different race than you and pretending to be that race and taking, that on. this is the drama of Yellowface. This is the look at the publishing world and what fame can do to you that Yellowface has. In that, it was good. I think it's mismarketed as a sci-fi, to be entirely honest. I also think there's a lot of elements in this book that make no sense as to why they're there. It's set up as not only do we get like real time, like, you know, the narrative with Zelu, our main character, going through this and everything. We also get interviews interspliced in it that are set up as like an after a really big event happens, and it's talking about Zelu and their relationship to Zelu. These interviews add literally nothing to the story. They do not have any context in what the story is trying to say at the moment. They do not set up anything in the next part of the story. They just add absolutely nothing. And there's also an interview included from somebody in this book who passes away before the end of the book. So it doesn't even make sense that the interview is included, because all these interviews are set up in a like a looking at the past tense of this after everything that happens with Zelu. So it doesn't make any sense that that particular interview is even in there, because that person is not alive. So that made no sense to me. The interviews, useless, did not add anything to the story. I also wish we had more of the sci-fi. Like, Zelu's world is very much our world, but with a little bit of higher tech. Like, self-driving cars are more normal in her world and more utilized. Like, she uses a self-driving car all the time in this book to get herself around, because she is a paraplegic and she just loves that freedom. And it's a great tool for that freedom. There's also tech in here that allows Zelu to be able to walk with these exo legs. They're called her exos. And they are a really, really interesting technology that I think if they were around today would make a very different world than we are in, if that was even available. And there's also like civilian space travel starting to become a thing in this world as well. So it feels like our world, but a little bit more advanced. And what I wish this book had done, one, I wish it was weirder. I wish the sci-fi had bled into Zelu's world so much harder. I wish that her world was even more advanced, because those little like technological advancements felt so out of place, because I was like, I thought we were reading our timeline. I thought we were like current contemporary. Why are we reading this? And then suddenly there's this very advanced thing that can happen. It felt a little disjointed for me for the sci-fi specifically. And the use of whatever her book is called that she writes, something robots, Rusted Robots, that's what it's called. The use of that in this text was not done to its full potential. I wish there was more, and I wish it was like more excerpts of the book, and I wish they were very clearly tied to Zelu's narrative as to why they are there, why this sci-fi narrative is even in the book. Because by the time we got to the end of it, it felt very shoehorned in as to why that sci-fi element was even introduced into this book. And it felt like, it felt a little messy at the end. It just didn't quite hit for me. Again, I wanted this to be weirder. I wanted it to be a little bit more sci-fi. I understand what it is trying to do, but I don't think it did it very well. And I think Nyeri Okorafor could have done this very easily. I read a couple of their books before, and like they're more heavily sci-fi books, and they've done weird. I have read Lagoon by them. They've done weird narration. They've done weird speculative vibes. I've read Binti, didn't like Binti, but they've done the sci-fi thing also, and they've done so much more with all the other books that they have written. I wish that this one was weirder. It was too meh for me. So that's why it gets 3.5 stars, which is really unfortunate, because I really wanted to like this book. I wanted it to be a new favorite, which is so sad. But yes, I do recommend this if you want to read something that is more literary fiction. This is not a sci-fi. I would not pitch this as sci-fi personally. It just has some sci-fi elements because it includes pieces of Zelu's book in it. I also read Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. This one really did not work for me. I was expecting to absolutely love it because it is pitched as sapphic cottagecore horror with lots of gore. And I was ready. I was ready for this because it just sounded like something that I would love. And I think what I was expecting, which I cannot say because it'll spoil the ending. I think what I was expecting to come out of this would have been a better ending for me personally. But I do think that it did what it set out to do perfectly. I think that after the fact, I think that it executed itself very perfectly, very well. Was it for me? Absolutely not. That is literally all I'm going to tell you about this book because it is a really short horror book novella type situation. But I did only give it 2.5 stars. And I did recommend it to my friend Sophie, so I really hope Sophie loves it. I feel like this is going to be exactly up her alley. It's going to be exactly how weird it needs to be. And I also feel like I'm in the minority with my feelings on this one, because I know Gina from TikTok and Lily from Lily's Library on TikTok and here on YouTube, they both absolutely loved this and the way that it hit. And I know Gina, in one of my videos when I was talking about like in a library haul on TikTok, she tagged someone else who was like, that last page though, like, oh my God, I've been thinking about it since. And I like, when I got to that last page, I have never felt so much disgust and discomfort run through me after reading a book. I wanted to throw the book away. I just was like, absolutely not. This is not for me. So that's Bloom. If you're at all interested in this, definitely pick it up, because I do think if this is something of interest to you, pick it up because you will love it. But for me, unfortunately, no. And then the only other book that I read this month was Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. These last three are all library picks. This is a nonfiction, so I don't rate my nonfictions, but if I had to rate this one, it would probably be a 1 or a 2 star. This nonfiction was very much not for me. It did not work at all for me. I think it was terribly crafted. I think the attempt and execution and the idea of this book was something kind of interesting, but just failed so hard.
Causing havoc and being a menace.
So yeah, Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton is a memoir centered around Dolly as a teenager growing into her 20s, and then it's all of her 20s, basically mainly focused on her 20s and the chaos of her life as a 20-year-old who has an incredibly bad drinking problem, addiction problem. Why? She always gets zoomy right around the time when I'm filming videos. I don't know. It follows Dolly's life and these different anecdotes that she chose to share about her life and relationships and her friends throughout her 20s. Great. Wonderful. What I understand from the craft of this book is that what she wanted to do was create something that felt very inspirational and very like, I'm so real, and like very indicative of her life as she was going through these years. And instead, what we got, which I should put in here, I am in the minority of this one. I read this one for book club with my friends. All my friends absolutely loved it and they thought it was great. And they thought all the elements that were added in made sense. I think they were awful. She added a lot of things in here that just didn't make sense to me as to why they were in there. There was fake emails written by someone who was not her that had nothing to do with anything in the story at that time, anything to do with the story that she was telling about a friend or anything. Like, they had nothing to do with anything. It was just like these weird little emails that made no sense. I believe one of my friends said that I think it was Tamsin who said that it felt very indicative of the kind of emails you would get at the time, the kind of personality you have at that age. Like, to them, it made more sense. But to me, I was like, this just feels like drivel. Why am I reading this? I want to read more about the sincere stories that Dolly has to share. I know she's like this comedian, this very funny person, but there's only a select few chapters in here that actually did anything for me. Really, it was only like one right in the middle when she was detailing a moment in her life where she had an extreme depressive episode and was going to therapy. Thank fuck. She was going to therapy. She definitely needed therapy. And she went to New York and fell in love with this man for a whirlwind romance. And it was just like, that was one of the chapters in this book that like actually did something for me. I don't know why. It was one of the only ones. And then like when she was talking about her friend's sister who passed away and her friend's marriage falling apart, and it's like whenever she was actually talking about sincere things, those were the moments that I was like, okay, I can see where this is happening. And that's why it gets in my head like a 2-star rating, sort of. I don't rate my nonfiction. I'm not solidly saying a rating for this one. But the addition of these weird moments just did nothing for me. Like, I was okay with the bad date diaries included in there because there was a couple of them, but they were not placed strategically. There was like 2 right at the beginning, 1 here, 1 at the end. Like, they were just not nicely placed. It was not nicely planned out or balanced in any way of like, okay, we're talking about this part of my life. Here's a bad date from this part of my life. We're talking about this part of my life and this story. Here's a bad date to like kind of lift the mood again. Like, it wasn't crafted. Like, this book was not crafted very well as a concept. And there was also recipes included, which was so fucking weird. Why? They were a waste of space. Freya, please. I just like that this is being underscored by my cat making noise in the background. But yeah, so it did not work for me. I wish it had done something different. But I will give it the fact that I read it for book club and my friends were like, hey, why don't we make one of the recipes for book club? And so we ended up making macaroni when they came over, and it was such a divine mac and cheese. Highly recommend the mac and cheese in there. But I do recommend you double the amount of pasta you use, because the amount of cheese and sauce that it made would have made it a cheese soup if you did not double the amount of pasta. So highly recommend doubling the amount of pasta. But yeah, this one just really was not for me. Anyways, my friends, so that is officially the 13 books that I read in February. We had 4 sci-fis, 4 fantasy, 1 dystopia, 1 lit fic, 1 memoir, 1 horror, 1 speculative, and 1 romance. I like that breakdown that I did in my little journal here. Also, there is going to be a video of me with this going up at some point. It's going to be an extra video. I just need to actually edit it and get it up. And this is my Limicrate book journal. This is the book journal that I'm using this year, and I'm really enjoying using it. This is how I've been tracking. So yes, I've read overall 1 physical book alone, no audiobook. Oh my God, crazy. And 12 physical books in tandem with audiobooks. It keeps me humble, realizing how much I need audiobooks to actually focus on reading. But I do read everything in tandem. I don't very often just do audiobooks anymore, which is very interesting. I was noticing that the other day. I was like, huh, everything I do I read in tandem. Yes, top genre was fantasy. I read 4,644 pages in February, and the average amount of pages I read per day was 178 pages. I think that's pretty great. I spent $192.82 on books during the month, and the top book of the month was Parable of the Sower. Everybody should read. I am so excited to read the sequel to that. It is on my March TBR. All right, my friends. That is everything for me. That is my monthly wrap up. That is how my reading went in the month of February. Please let me know down below what your top read of the month was, and if you had a good reading month overall, and how you're enjoying March so far. I'm gonna leave this here. Thank you so much for watching. I will catch you in another video very, very, very soon. Stay kind and keep on reading.